Okay, so this is about metal and hard rock one-off albums. This is basically about bands that have one great album. Either they're a new band and they only have one album out, or they just put out a great first album and then never made any more. Or they're a band with one great album and a bunch of bad albums, or at least albums that aren't nearly as good in my opinion. So this might be some cool stuff you've never heard before, or maybe some of these bands you thought you didn't like, but they actually have one really cool album with some great music on it. Number 10 is Heaven Is Gone, the only album ever released by Seventh Void in 2009. This sounds basically like the ultimate doom metal band, just strong, thundering, heavy stuff that flows powerfully at slow and moderate tempos. With a really talented singer that sounds kinda like Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. I ended up putting almost every song on this album on my favorites playlist, which is pretty uncommon for me. If I had to recommend just one track to listen to first, I would pick Killing You Slow. It starts with a booming, powerhouse metal riff that tips my heavy music meter off at a 9, and alternates that with a slower, more eerie sounding rock riff of about a 5. The second half of the song is a vehement progressive metal succession that breaks away from the standard verse-chorus structure and maintains about a 9 for most of it, until the finale starts to wind down. Here's a brief description of the other songs. The contrast metal songs have a light verse contrasted by a heavy chorus, or the other way around, like Metallica's Fade to Black or Nevermore's Insignificant or a ton of other songs. Contrast rock is basically the same thing, except the heavy part isn't quite heavy enough to be metal. Progressive metal just means that it progresses along from one riff to another without following the standard structure of verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, or anything like that. Progressive music doesn't follow that. It just goes along its own way, usually marked by subtle and gradual changes. Number 9 is a self-titled EP from an independent Toronto band called Rise for Order. I might have put this higher on the list if it was a full album and not a 5-song EP, but they do have 2 other great songs that predate the EP, Paralyzed and Bring This Fire Down. This band is so underground that I can't even find a download for the studio version of Bring This Fire Down. But there is a pretty good live version I ripped off of YouTube. If anyone knows where I can download that, leave a comment. As far as the EP, just listen to Fear Me and you should be hooked. Fear Me is a progressive metal piece with evocative light points, thrilling fast-paced torrents of power chords, and roaring progressions with soaring, captivating, hard-rocking high points. These are my recommendations from my favorites list for Rise for Order. Number 8 is A Perfect Lie, the 2012 debut album from French underground symphonic metal band Marquis. No More Life is one of the best numbers on this record. It starts off at a 9 with a menacing blend of power chords and orchestral sounds. Most of the song stays around an 8 or a 9 in the metal spectrum, except for the first verse and the beginning of the bridge, which are lighter. It also carries a hair-raising, tensely epic kind of mood. The song peaks with a compelling guitar solo at 3 minutes and 30 seconds in. They decided to release a single from this album called Mechanical Hearts. They did a video for it and everything. You should probably skip that as an introduction and listen to these songs instead. And the one I described as a hard ballad, that's what I call a song with hard power chords, but with a slow-paced ballad-like mood maintained at the same time. Pissures de Vie also happens to be one of the best songs by this band. Number 7 was actually quite a popular album, Antichrist Superstar from 1996. After that, Marilyn Manson went in a very different musical direction, which was not my cup of tea at all. Some people told me, oh man, you've got to listen to the first album. Well, I've heard Portraits of an American Family also, and while it's not terrible, I'm not a huge punk rock fan either. So Antichrist Superstar for me is the only really good album. If you've never heard it, start with Angel with the Scabbed Wings. It's a slam and head-nodding, catchy heavy metal song that for the most part stays at around a 9 on the heavy music meter. It's on my top 100 of all time list at number 94. And here's my recommended songs for that era of Marilyn Manson's career. Number 6 is from a young band that seems to have made a massive improvement in 2013 with their album Masks. They put out an album every year for 6 years in a row, and to me, all those 6 albums were pretty subpar. But damn, these kids must have taken music lessons in 2012, because they didn't put out an album that year, but in 2013, bam, Masks just blew all their old shit out of the water. Listen to Killing in Your Name if you want to hear what I'm talking about. The deafening power chords crush it at an 8, also with resonant palm muting and vibrant note bending throughout the song. But the vocals... Alexia Rodriguez has an uncommonly badass voice, with a lot of power and grit behind it. The only female vocalists I can think of with a style similar to that are Lizzie Hale and Sandra Sabo, but neither of them have a real heavy metal band backing them like Alexia. I Set to Kill is just way heavier and way more my style musically, although Sandra Sabo has some decent metal covers on YouTube. A single for this album was released called Infected with a music video. Don't let that crap be your introduction to this. Listen to these songs instead. Number 5 is Somewhere in Between, the 2001 debut album of Systematic. They did release a second album, but its melodies weren't as powerful and its rhythms just weren't as engaging. It had a few okay songs, but they were easily forgettable. If you'd like an example that illustrates how awesome the first album was, listen to Deep Colors Bleed, with its cool, uncanny, echoing verse riff that staggers along at a 4 and then revs it up to an 8 with an invigorating pre-chorus in preparation for the strong, memorable chorus with a bellowing vocal hook that leaves you in awe. Here are the short descriptions of the album's highlights. Number 4 is Leave a Whisper, the 2003 debut album of Shinedown. Now, they have put out a lot of other albums that had success. However, I find the first album far, far superior to everything else. So what happened to this band? It seems like the music is less epic, it has less majesty, it's definitely less heavy. And on the vocals too. On Leave a Whisper, it's like Brent Smith was just crying out with all the energy and emotion his vocal cords could possibly output. On the other albums, it sounds like he's just not. Some of the songs have little bits of what Leave a Whisper had in spades, but that's all. Most of the songs in this album are on my favorites playlist. For a good introduction, just listen to Fly From Inside. The calm ringing of the acoustic verse is blasted away by the 6 of the escalating pre-chorus. The infectious, resounding chorus that heightens the heaviness to a 7 before culminating with a commanding and moving 8 right at the end before the next verse. Number 3 is from 1995. It's End of the Light, the debut album of Release. This is so underground that I realized no one had uploaded the songs to YouTube except for the main single, Drown. So I uploaded the rest myself. It's a shame that this bizarrely mellifluous and disquietingly astounding album never got enough exposure and wasn't followed up. Just listen to the song Idiot Box. It has apprehensive, immersive lows, rocking transitions, and menacing, blaring highs that get up to an 8 on the heavy music meter. The song is topped off with a mystifying and subtle guitar solo at the end. Number 2 is Point of Origin, the 2005 debut album of Allele. It combines evocative hard rock hooks with resonant palm muting and pulse-pounding, ear-splitting heavy power chords. They have a second album, but it seems much more generic and forgettable. The only songs I still listen to from that are Feed the Wolves and Lost in Your Words. The song Stitches would make a good introduction to Point of Origin. It starts with a rolling rhythm and blistering power chords that tease intermittently before rolling with the rhythm in a 9. Then they back off to reveal nuanced, echoey acoustic notes. Then they roar back again. The chorus pulsates along at an 8, accompanied by the wailing zenith of the vocal melody. This song really ought to be on my top 100 all-time list, but I didn't discover it until after I already uploaded that. Number 1 is an album that I've mentioned before, the 1998 industrial metal masterpiece, that is the Clay People's self-titled album. They have other albums, but the rest are too electronic for my taste. It seems that blending their pure industrial sound with heavy metal was just an experiment for them, but one that I'm very glad they did. Waking the Dead is the only song that I still listen to that's not from the self-titled album. For an introduction, check out Calling Spaceship Damien Grief, my 12th favorite song of all time. The lights section has a peculiar ambient feel, from which the chorus surges to an 8 with an invigorating barrage of sliding power chords, which is complemented nicely by an alien-like cybernetic synth sound. At 3 minutes and 20 seconds, the captivating bridge escalates to an absolutely epic evolution of gripping, turbulent, streaking synth sounds and storming power chords. Alright, hope you've all discovered something that you like. Have a nice day.